My mother, Catherine, got pregnant with me at 19, and my father, Dwayne, married her because his family expected it. Catherine told me this starting around age 7. I was the reason she never finished college, the reason they fought, the reason their savings stayed empty. My sister Annie came 2 years later. Annie was planned. Annie was wanted. Annie got birthday parties and new clothes in the bedroom with the window. I got hand-me-downs and a converted storage room in the basement with a dehumidifier that ran all night. It wasn't one big dramatic thing. It was 1,000 small ones. Catherine signing Annie up for dance and telling me we couldn't afford activities for both of us. Dwayne taking Annie to games while I did yard work. Both of them at every one of Annie's school events and forgetting mine completely. I won second place at a science fair in 6th grade and nobody showed up. The teacher drove me home. Catherine said I should have reminded her. By 16, I understood completely. I decided 2 things. First, I'd build a life where I never needed them. Second, if the day came where they needed me, I'd make sure they felt every year of what they'd done. Left at 18? 2 jobs, shared apartment, technical program for industrial engineering. Met my ex-wife Melissa at 23. Had Travis, now 10, and my daughter, now 8. Melissa and I split when the kids were small. She remarried. We do week on, week off. It works. The kids are everything to me. I kept minimal contact with Catherine and Dwayne during those years. Holiday calls, maybe birthdays. They met the kids a handful of times, never babysat. Annie lived 20 minutes from them and saw them constantly. Fine by me. Last November, my company offered me an emergency contract in Belgium. 3 weeks, massive pay. Problem was timing. It fell during my custody week and Melissa was traveling with her husband's family. I needed someone for the kids for about 12 days. My buddy Isaac had just had knee surgery and couldn't help. I was stuck. Catherine called about something unrelated 2 days before my deadline. I still don't fully understand why I did it, but I asked her. Before I even finished, she was saying yes, absolutely. They'd love to. Dwayne would be thrilled. She sounded genuinely excited, and I thought maybe they'd mellowed out. Maybe grandparents was different. Dropped the kids off Thursday. Catherine had made dinner. Guest room had fresh sheets. She'd bought snacks the kids liked. Dwayne showed them his model trains. I flew out Friday morning. First week was good. Kids called every evening. Happy. Travis said Dwayne was teaching him card games. My daughter said Catherine let her help baking. I started thinking maybe I'd been wrong. Second week, things shifted. Calls got shorter. My daughter sounded flat. Travis gave one-word answers. I asked Catherine directly if everything was okay, and she told me the kids were just tired from staying up late. Stop worrying so much. I always overthink everything. Day 10. I was in a conference room in Brussels when my phone exploded. Danny, my neighbor, was texting in all caps. Danny lived 3 houses from my parents because I'd bought in the same neighborhood on purpose. Not to be close to them, but to keep an eye on things. He'd been walking his dog, saw Travis on the front steps in a t-shirt, my daughter on the sidewalk crying with no shoes. Front door locked. Danny banged on it, and Dwayne told him to mind his own business. The kids were being punished for being disrespectful. Then Danny put my daughter on. She told me Catherine had been yelling at them for 2 days, told them I didn't love them enough to stay, that I dumped them there. Because they were a burden, just like I was a burden. They'd been sleeping in the basement on an air mattress for 4 nights, because Catherine said real beds were for family. Travis told me Dwayne hit him with a belt across the back when he asked for breakfast because he was being demanding and ungrateful. Booked a flight while still on the phone. 12 hours later, I was at the police station. Catherine and Dwayne had been detained. Travis had a visible welt. My daughter had mild frostbite on 2 toes. CPS was contacted. Catherine started saying it wasn't what it looked like. The kids were acting out, they were overwhelmed. Dwayne sat there saying nothing. I didn't speak to them. Took my kids to urgent care, got everything documented, brought them home, put them in my bed. I wasn't surprised. Angry. Like nothing I'd ever felt, but not surprised. Catherine and Dwayne did to my children exactly what they did to me. The basement. The belt. The words about being a burden. A carbon copy. They hadn't changed. They'd been waiting for the opportunity, and I was stupid enough to hand it to them. But here's the thing. I've been preparing for Catherine and Dwayne to show who they really are for 15 years. Career. House. Finances. Records of every interaction. All built so that when they tried something, I could dismantle them. I never thought it would be through my kids. I thought it'd be some fight over inheritance or Annie's wedding. Instead, they went after my children, and that changed the scale of what I'm willing to do. First thing I did was call Annie. Because Annie has no idea what Catherine and Dwayne really are. She got the good version, and she's been living in a fantasy where our parents are wonderful people who got a little overwhelmed. I'm about to pull that fantasy apart, and when I do, Catherine and Dwayne lose the only person who still thinks they're worth anything. 16 years old, standing in a basement that smells like mildew and broken promises, listening to laughter coming through the ceiling. And instead of breaking, this kid started building. Most people in that situation either crumble or they explode. This guy did neither. He went quiet and started stacking bricks. Every job, every financial decision, every documented phone call, bricks. And the most devastating part is he was right. 15 years of people probably telling him, they're your parents. They love you in their own way, give them a chance. And then the second he gives them a chance, they speedrun his entire childhood trauma on his kids in 10 days. The basement, the belt, the exact same words. Catherine didn't even bother writing new material. She pulled "you're a burden" out of storage, like a family heirloom she'd been keeping in a drawer. And Dwayne, a grown man hitting a 10-year-old with a belt because the kid asked for breakfast. Not because he broke something, not because he did anything remotely wrong, because a hungry child had the audacity to say, "Can I eat?" Danny is the MVP of this entire story, by the way. Danny was just walking his dog and accidentally became the most important witness in a child abuse case. Protect Danny at all costs. Update 1. Alright, a lot happened since my last post. Some of you asked for an update, so here it is. The call with Annie. I called her the night I got back, kids asleep in my bed, expecting her to be horrified. Instead, Annie's first response was asking me what the kids did to provoke it. Her first instinct was to ask what a 10-year-old and 8-year-old did to deserve being hit and locked outside in winter. I told her everything. The basement, the belt, Catherine calling them trash, the frostbite. Annie kept circling back to the same point, that Catherine and Dwayne are older now. They get overwhelmed. Kids can be a lot. Maybe I should have prepared the kids better for staying with grandparents. I told Annie that Catherine and Dwayne did the exact same things to me growing up. The basement, the belt, the words. Things I'd never told her because she was either too young to notice or too comfortable being the favorite. Annie went quiet and then told me she thinks I'm exaggerating because I'm emotional right now, and that I've always had a tendency to make things about me. Annie wasn't going to be an ally. Annie was going to be a problem. 2 days later, Catherine and Dwayne showed up uninvited at my house. Kids were at Melissa's by then, so I let them in because I wanted to hear every excuse. Catherine did a whole performance about not sleeping, feeling terrible, things getting out of hand. She kept saying the kids started acting up and she didn't know how to handle it. Dwayne stood behind her, nodding. Catherine claimed Travis talked back about dinner and it escalated, that my daughter cried too much and stressed her out, that the basement was because the guest room was being used for storage now. That was a lie, because I saw fresh sheets on the guest room bed when I dropped the kids off. Dwayne finally said the belt was a one-time thing, and his father used one on him, and he turned out fine. I asked Dwayne if his father also locked him outside barefoot in freezing weather. He told me I was blowing things out of proportion. The kids were outside for a few minutes. Danny checked his dog walking app GPS log. 30 minutes minimum. The kids confirmed longer. While they were in my living room doing their apology tour, Catherine's phone buzzed. I saw a text preview from Annie that said something about making sure they tell me the kids were difficult so I understand their side. Catherine grabbed her phone fast, but I'd already seen it. Annie wasn't just defending them. She was coaching them on what to say. I told them to leave. Told them they'd hear from my lawyer about the CPS case and that I was pursuing criminal charges for what Dwayne did to Travis. Catherine started crying and saying I was going to destroy this family. I told her she destroyed it 30 years ago when she decided one kid was garbage and the other was gold. Now here's the part that changes everything. Catherine and Dwayne's house is not paid off. They refinanced 8 years ago to help Annie with her wedding. With Dwayne's retirement 3 years ago, they're stretched thin on a pension and Catherine's part-time income. I know this because I've been listening for 15 years. Every holiday call, every birthday chat. When Catherine mentioned the refinance, I remember. When Dwayne talked about his pension, I filed it. When Annie mentioned their parents worrying about property taxes, I noted it. I called my lawyer and told him I wanted a civil suit against Catherine and Dwayne for medical costs, my daughter's frostbite treatment, Travis's injuries, plus ongoing therapy for both kids, structured so that if they can't pay their assets, including the house, are on the table. My lawyer said it was aggressive but doable, with documented injuries and an active CPS case. Annie called me the next day and she was done with the Calm Sister Act. She was furious. Told me I was being vindictive, using my kids to settle a score, that Catherine called her sobbing about losing the house. Then Annie said she'd testify on Catherine and Dwayne's behalf and tell any court I've always been unstable and resentful. Then Annie said the thing that shifted my entire plan. She told me Catherine and Dwayne were planning to leave the house to her in their will. It was already arranged. If I took the house through a lawsuit, I wasn't just hurting our parents, I was stealing Annie's inheritance. So that's what this is really about for Annie. Not the kids, not whether what happened was wrong. The house, her house. And now, she's fighting me because justice threatens something she considers hers. I told Annie if she wants to defend on a witness stand a man who hit a 10-year-old with a belt, that's her choice. But she should think about what that looks like. The house was never hers. If Catherine and Dwayne have to sell it to pay for what they did, that's their consequence. Annie hung up. 20 minutes later, Catherine called saying Annie was hysterical and I needed to stop before I tear the family apart. I told her the family was torn apart the day she put my kids in the basement and let Dwayne swing a belt at my son. So now, I'm on 3 fronts. Criminal case against Dwayne. Civil suit for damages. Annie as an active opponent protecting her inheritance. And on top of all that, Melissa called because Travis is having night terrors and she wants to know what happened. I had to explain everything, and now she's questioning whether our custody arrangement needs to change because this happened on my watch. My parents didn't just hurt my kids. They gave Melissa ammunition to question my judgment as a father. Annie is lining up to testify against me. Catherine and Dwayne are circling wagons. I've been waiting for this fight for 15 years. More updates coming. Annie is a case study in what happens when the golden child grows up. She's not evil. She's not even stupid. She's just someone whose entire identity is built on the premise that her parents are good people. Because if they're not good people, then every privilege she got, the dance classes, the birthday parties, the bedroom with the window, the wedding they refinanced the house for, all of that stops being my parents loved me and starts being my parents loved me more and I watched my brother suffer and did nothing. That's a mirror Annie cannot look into. So she won't. She'll coach witnesses. She'll threaten testimony. She'll do anything to keep that mirror covered. And then she drops the mask completely when she mentions the inheritance. A child was hit with a belt, and another one got frostbite, and Annie's doing math on property values. That tells you everything about what that household produced. Catherine raised 2 kids. One she abused into a weapon, and one she spoiled into a shield. And now the weapon and the shield are finally pointed at each other. Also, Dwayne saying, "My father used a belt and I turned out fine. Brother, you are currently being investigated by CPS and facing criminal charges. You did not turn out fine. You turned out to be the exact thing you should have spent your whole life trying not to be." Update 2. If you're still following this, thank you. The last 2 weeks have been war on every front. Melissa situation first. She requested a meeting at a coffee place near her house. Brought a printed list of concerns. Her argument was that I showed poor judgment leaving the kids with Catherine and Dwayne, given my own childhood. And she wanted to revisit custody. She was calm and organized. Which was almost worse because she'd clearly been talking to a lawyer. I told her I made a mistake trusting my parents and I'd never repeat it. But changing custody over one incident where I was the one who got the kids out and got medical care wasn't fair. She told me fair doesn't matter. What matters is Travis wakes up screaming 3 nights a week and my daughter flinches when adults raise their voices. We went back and forth for an hour. She said she was pursuing a temporary modification, reduced overnights until the kids are in therapy and improving. I told her I'd fight it but get them into therapy immediately. We left it tense but not hostile. Annie went full battle mode. She moved into Catherine and Dwayne's house to support them through this difficult time, which really means manage the situation and protect the house. She started calling me every few days with different strategies. First, guilt, saying Catherine wasn't eating and Dwayne's blood pressure was dangerous and did I want to put my elderly parents in the hospital. I told her their blood pressure isn't my problem. Then bargaining. Annie proposed Catherine and Dwayne pay for therapy directly. No lawsuit, no courts. Everyone moves on. I told her the criminal investigation into Dwayne isn't something I can just drop because she wants a deal. She said I was hiding behind the legal system because I couldn't handle a family conflict like an adult. I told her a family conflict is forgetting someone's birthday. What happened to my kids is assault. Then Annie played her biggest card. She told me if I went through with the civil suit, she and her husband would help Catherine and Dwayne hire a lawyer who'd argue I set this up, that I deliberately left my kids with people I knew were abusive so I'd have a legal reason to go after them. That, I engineered it. She said any judge would see that a man who admits planning revenge for 15 years isn't a victim. He's a manipulator. I need to be honest, that one landed. Because there's a version where a judge looks at my post, sees I bought a house in my parents' neighborhood to watch them, sees I cataloged their finances for years, and thinks this guy had an agenda. My lawyer said it's a stretch but not impossible with the right attorney. The key is the kids' injuries and Danny's testimony. Because no matter my motivations, the injuries are documented and real. That shifted things. I needed Danny locked in. He saw everything, called 911, has GPS timestamps. Without him, my case weakens. I went to Danny's place and we talked. He's willing to testify, but nervous because Catherine came to his door asking why he got involved instead of coming to her first. And Dwayne stopped him in the driveway saying this was a family matter and outsiders shouldn't have called police. They're pressuring my witness. Nothing illegal, but leaning on him socially, reminding him he lives in the neighborhood and has to see them daily. Third front, the one keeping me up at night. My daughter asked me why Grandma said I ruined her life, not the kid's situation. My life with Catherine when I was a child. She asked if it's true I ruined Grandma's life by being born, if that's why Grandma was mean, because she was afraid my daughter would be bad too. An 8-year-old trying to trace adult cruelty back to something before she existed. And she's not entirely wrong. Catherine was cruel to my kids because of how she feels about me. My children are being punished for existing in the same family line as the child Catherine never wanted. I told my daughter the truth simply. Grandma has problems with being a parent that started before she was born. None of it is her fault, and she'll never stay with them again. Travis hasn't asked anything, just goes quiet when they come up. His therapist says that's common, and it'll surface eventually. So here's where things stand. Melissa pushing custody modification, Annie entrenched at Catherine and Dwayne's coordinating defense, Catherine and Dwayne pressuring Danny. Criminal case against Dwayne moving forward. Civil suit being prepared. My kids in therapy. But here's what none of them know. While Annie's been playing defense attorney, I've been talking to Dwayne's pension administrator. His pension has a survivor benefit listing Catherine as sole beneficiary. Pensions can be garnished for civil judgments in my state. If I win and Dwayne can't pay, his pension is on the table. If his pension gets garnished, Catherine can't make the mortgage. And if she can't make the mortgage, the house Annie thinks she's inheriting goes to the bank. I'm not taking their house. I'm creating a situation where their own financial reality takes it. There's a difference. Annie's going to find that out soon. Next update will be the last. I need to sit with two things at the same time here because this story demands it. On one hand, this man is an absolute surgeon. The pension garnishment leading to the mortgage default leading to the house sale. He's not kicking down a door. He's removing a load-bearing wall and letting gravity do the work. That is 15 years of quiet fury turned into legal architecture. On the other hand, and I say this with genuine concern, his 8-year-old daughter is sitting on a couch somewhere asking if she was born cursed because her grandmother told her the bloodline is poisoned. That little girl is trying to do generational trauma math in the 3rd grade. And while her dad is running a 3-front war with the precision of someone who's been rehearsing this in his head since he was 16, his son is screaming in his sleep and his daughter flinches at loud voices. There's a version of this where the revenge is so perfect, so complete, so satisfying. And at the end of it, he turns around and his kids needed him present, not victorious. Melissa showing up with a printed list is actually the most reasonable thing anyone has done in this entire story. She's not wrong. She's a mother watching her children deteriorate, and she doesn't care about the scoreboard. She cares about the screaming at 3 a.m. The Annie manipulation attempt, though, arguing he set it up, that's genuinely terrifying because it's almost plausible. Not because he did it, but because the internet post where he talks about 15 years of preparation is sitting right there. This is why you don't narrate your revenge arc in real time on Reddit while you're in active litigation. Your enemies are reading it. Final update. Last update. Everything came to a head. Dwayne was formally charged. Misdemeanor child abuse. His lawyer tried to get it reduced, arguing it was a single incident of corporal punishment by a grandparent. But the urgent care photos and Danny's statement with GPS timestamps killed that argument. The prosecutor said the frostbite on my daughter's toes sealed it because it showed prolonged exposure, not a momentary lapse. Dwayne accepted a plea. No jail but 18 months probation, mandatory anger management, and permanent placement on the state child abuse registry. That last part follows him everywhere. Catherine wasn't charged criminally, but CPS substantiated findings against both of them for neglect and emotional abuse on their record permanently. The civil suit is where things got real. Medical costs for frostbite treatment, Travis's injuries, projected therapy for both kids over 2 years. The total wasn't massive by lawsuit standards, but it was massive by Catherine and Dwayne standards. More than their savings. More than they could cover without touching the house or pension. Annie made one last play. Came to my house alone. Sat at my kitchen table. She told me our parents are flawed people who made a terrible mistake, but they're still our parents. She said the house is the only thing they have. She's been paying their property taxes for 2 years because they can't afford it, and her family is stretched thin helping them. She asked me what I actually want. I told Annie I want Catherine and Dwayne to understand that what they did has a cost they'll feel for the rest of their lives the way I felt their rejection for 18 years. I want Travis to sleep without screaming. I want my daughter to stop flinching. I want Dwayne to think about that belt every day. And I want Catherine to know the kid she called a burden grew up to be the person who decides what her life looks like now. Annie told me that sounds like revenge, not justice. I told her she's right. It is revenge. I've been planning it since I was 16, standing in a basement bedroom, listening to Catherine laugh with Annie upstairs in the room with the window. The difference is why now I have documented evidence that makes it bulletproof. Catherine and Dwayne's lawyer offered a settlement, a third of what I was asking. My lawyer said no. They came back with the full amount on a 5-year payment plan. My lawyer said this was reasonable and asked if I wanted to take it. I said no. I told him I wanted the judgment enforceable against assets, including pension garnishment. He pushed back and said a judge might prefer the plan. I told him to file for full amount with asset enforcement. The reason is simple. A payment plan lets them keep the house, keeps the pension intact, lets Annie keep her inheritance. Let's all three absorb this as a monthly bill and eventually forget. I don't want them to forget. I want them to lose something they can never get back the way my kids lost things they can never get back. Travis lost the ability to trust adults. My daughter lost 2 toenails, and the belief that family is safe. Catherine and Dwayne can lose the house. Judgment came down in my favor, full amount. The judge reviewed their financial disclosure and agreed a structured plan wasn't viable for the full amount without asset liquidation. House and pension garnishment both on the table. Annie called crying, telling me I'd ruined our parents' retirement. They'd have to sell and move into a rental. Dwayne is 68 and I've taken everything. I told Annie that Dwayne took a belt to a 10-year-old and Catherine put an 8-year-old barefoot in snow and called her trash. Every consequence started with their decision. And if Annie had spent less time coaching them and protecting her inheritance and more time being honest about who they are, maybe this goes differently. Melissa and I settled custody. She agreed to keep our current schedule after I showed her the kids were in therapy, that I'd added safety measures, and Catherine and Dwayne would never have access again. The therapist provided a letter saying stability in both homes was important for recovery. Melissa is still wary but fair. So here's how it ended. Catherine and Dwayne are selling the house. The house where Catherine gave Annie the window room and put me in the basement. The house where Dwayne's belt hung by the back door for 30 years. The house Annie was promised. Going on the market next month. They'll move into a rental on whatever's left of the pension after garnishment. Annie isn't speaking to me. Catherine sent a long text saying I've become exactly the cruel person she always feared I'd be. I read it, thought about my daughter's toes and my son's back, and deleted it. When I was a kid in that basement listening to Catherine and Annie upstairs living the life I wasn't allowed to have, I told myself someday the people in the rooms with windows would understand what it feels like to lose everything and have nobody care. I was 16. I was angry, and I never stopped being angry. Catherine said I ruined her life by being born. My daughter asked me if that was true. It's not, but I did ruin Catherine's retirement, and I'm not sorry. Catherine's last text, "You've become exactly the cruel person she always feared I'd be." That is the most perfectly self-unaware sentence a human being has ever typed. She created him. She took a child, told him he was a mistake, put him in a basement, swung a belt at him, poured love into his sister right in front of his face for 18 years, and then acted shocked when the thing she built turned around and functioned exactly as designed. You don't get to forge a sword and then complain that it's sharp. But I'm gonna be real. This story doesn't have a hero. It has a protagonist. And there is a difference. This man won. Completely. Legally, financially, strategically. Total victory on every front. He dismantled his parents' retirement with the same methodical patience they used to dismantle his childhood. Poetic, brutal, earned, honestly. But his own lawyer told him the payment plan was reasonable and he said no. Not because it wouldn't cover therapy, not because it wasn't enough for the kids, because it would let them forget. He didn't want justice. He wanted permanence. He wanted a wound that never closes. And he said it out loud to Annie, to us. It is revenge. Most people on the internet would never admit that. He did. I respect the honesty even as it makes me uneasy. The question that's going to haunt me is whether Travis and his sister, 10 years from now, look back and see a father who protected them, or a father who used what happened to them as fuel for a war he'd been planning since before they were born. Because those kids are in therapy right now, and their dad rejected a full settlement, not a lowball, the full amount. Because the payment structure wasn't painful enough for the people who hurt them. At some point, the kids' recovery and the parents' punishment became 2 separate goals, and he chose the punishment. I think Catherine and Dwayne deserved every single consequence they got. The registry, the charges, the CPS findings, all of it. Abusers who repeat the cycle on the next generation deserve to feel the full weight of the system landing on them. But the House? Refusing the payment plan specifically to force asset liquidation? That wasn't for Travis. That wasn't for his daughter's toes. That was for the 16-year-old in the basement. And that 16-year-old deserved justice too. I'm not dismissing that. But he's making decisions for his children with the emotions of his inner child. And those are not always the same thing.